encourage all of you to ask Ben any questions you'd like. If you do have a question for Ben when we reach that portion, please use the raise your hand feature and I'll call on you by name to ask your question. And while I'm sure we're all Zoom veterans by now, please remember to keep yourselves on mute when not speaking. So before I introduce Ben, I just want to establish why we've invited him to speak today. We all know the existential threat that climate change poses to all of us. Anyone who lived through the devastation of Sandy knows that this is a phenomenon that does not discriminate. It takes from communities at an increasingly breakneck pace. The same waterways that grew New York into the global powerhouse it is now threaten it. Our 500-mile shoreline is going to be forever changed over the next 3 decades, during which sea levels are expected to rise 1 to 2 feet. But this moment of challenge also presents new opportunities for both the city and the building industry. An estimated $21 billion will have been spent by 2030 on building retrofits to meet New York's aggressive carbon caps. And with federal dollars, likely through the National Infrastructure Plan, making its way to New York through Congress, there will be more projects to come that shrink our carbon footprint, make our shoreline and infrastructure more resilient, and create good jobs in emerging sectors within our industry. So I know we're all very excited to hear from Ben and the need for this work and what opportunities exist now and in the future. So I'm happy to introduce him. Ben has been with the mayor's office since 2014, first serving as senior policy advisor and then special advisor for sustainability and infrastructure to the first deputy mayor. Before going to City Hall, Ben focused on budget, land use, street safety, transportation, healthcare, immigration, and labor issues as a senior policy associate for then public advocate Bill de Blasio. So Ben, I think it's safe to say you didn't have too much on your plate. Prior to his appointment as director this April, Ben helped realize historic climate and transportation initiatives as deputy director of the mayor's office of policy and planning. So thank you again for being here, Ben. If our president and CEO Carlo were here, he would praise you for being from Brooklyn, but I'm from Queens, so I'll just praise you for being a New Yorker. But thanks again for being here, and I turn it over to you now.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thank you so much for everyone for really taking the time out of your day and really looking forward to the conversation ahead. So I have some slides here. So as Michael said, I'm Ben Furness. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Sustainability. And you know, this office emerges out of the merging of 2 offices, the Office of Sustainability and the Office of Climate Policy and Programs. And our mission is fairly straightforward. So we lead on near-term and long-term policies, legislation, and program implementation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So be a leader in the fight against global climate change, improve social and environmental health outcomes, and align our built environment, our waste system, our transportation system, our financial system through our pension funds and our investments, our buildings and our energy sector to really mobilize an all-court press citywide response to climate change. We're in the business of reducing our emissions. My colleague Janie Bavishi, who's the mayor's office of leader of the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency, is tasked with preparing our city for the realities of climate change. So what does this mean our work really does, or the significance of our work? You know, as you said, Michael, the city is facing an enormous challenge, and it's the same challenge that the world is facing. So the New York Panel on Climate Change estimates that since 1900, the mean annual temperature has increased pretty substantially. We've seen sea levels rise, and our precipitation is getting more frequent and more intense. This increases the hazards associated, the hazards that New Yorkers face, and it's particularly borne by the most vulnerable populations in New York City. By the 2050s, we're anticipating 4 to 6% degree Fahrenheit increase in average temperature. This means we're going to see triple the number of 90-degree days that we do right now. We're going to see an increase in average precipitation and pretty substantial sea level rises, and an increase in the frequency and intensity of coastal flooding. Now this is all if the city and the world don't take action. But I think thanks to the leadership of the Biden administration and the state government over the years, and the leadership of the city and Mayor Bill de Blasio, we're aspiring to lead and meet the moment. And that means rising to the occasion to reduce emissions across all the sectors of our economy. Most recently, there was a international panel on climate change report, the periodic reports that the IPCC puts out. And it pointed out that climate change is accelerating. It's unequivocally attributed to greenhouse gas emissions, and that emissions need to be drastically cut now to avoid catastrophic warming. Also of some serious interest, the International Energy Agency recently put out a roadmap to deep decarbonization and carbon neutrality by 2050. And in that, it really spoke about the future of our buildings and the future of the built environment, which is something that I know is of keen importance to this group here today. And what it essentially articulated was a future where we see major decreases in the energy uses of existing buildings, shifting towards a much more efficient building stock, both on electricity and fossil fuels, and moving towards a future where every new building that's constructed does not rely on fossil fuels, and instead is a high efficiency building that uses electricity, and that electricity coming increasingly from renewable and zero carbon sources of electricity. So that is the global roadmap that the IEA sort of laid out for us, and that's something that we're that is the course we're hoping to chart. We're really with all of you for the city of New York. And we really need to be using every tool at our disposal to achieve these goals. A little history of this administration's commitment. So in 2014, we set a goal of reducing New York City's greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. That's basically in line with the types of reductions that we're going to need to see across the city, across the country, and across the world. In 2017, we were the first city to release a climate action plan that was aligned with the commitments that cities, that countries had agreed to under the Paris Agreement. This was obviously a moment when the federal government was stepping back from their climate ambitions and their climate commitments, but we felt strongly that it was important for the levels of government that took climate change seriously, needed to continue to move ahead. And most recently in 2019, we committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. So that's means dramatic reductions in our contributions to greenhouse gas emissions, and working to build a livable, sustainable, and equitable New York along the way. One thing I always talk about is even as we're fighting climate change to prevent a changing world, to keep us safer for the future, we really think that there are so many places where reducing carbon emissions can also yield really terrific improvements to people's quality of life in the here and now, whether air quality, livability, interior comfort, affordability. There's lots of we say co-benefits, which is a pretty antiseptic word, but it essentially means there's lots of good things that can come when we take action on climate. So what does this really mean when it comes to the main systems that the city operates or is adjacent to or works closely with? To achieve really deep reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, we're really looking to do four things addressing four major sectors. So one is to improve the efficiency of our buildings and shift away from the use of fossil fuels as much as we can. The second, as I described, is to pursue clean energy, which essentially means making sure that the sources of electricity that we use to power our buildings and our whole economy are coming from clean and renewable sources of electricity like wind and solar and hydropower. And it also means making sure that we have enough battery storage to support our grid when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. And it also means expanding low carbon transportation options. So obviously in New York City, we are the most transit accessible cities in the country. An enormous number of the times we step out of our doors to get around our city, we're relying on an all-electric transit system that we call our subway. But we still take a lot of trips in everything from personal vehicles to private cars to buses that rely on fossil fuel internal combustion engines. And so we're really looking to shift away from the use of personal cars for a lot of trips when those aren't necessary, by embracing bike lanes and bus lanes and improvement to our transit system, embracing transit-oriented housing growth and job growth. But then it also means making sure that the cars and vehicles that are going to remain on the roads are electrified as quickly and expeditiously as possible. So shifting to electric cars for our city fleet, for example, for the school buses that our kids ride in, and for all the cars that continue to be driven on our roads into the future in the next couple decades. Finally, we think a lot about reducing waste we send to landfills. This is good for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that a sort of significant chunk of our emissions come from the methane that escapes from our waste. And so to the extent we can be reducing or diverting waste away from landfills, that's a really positive step to take. A lot of that involves the way we process our organics waste. But I think of most important to this group, I'd love to talk about our buildings, right? So you may have heard this stat, we say it all the time, but about 2/3 of our citywide emissions here in New York City comes from the energy we use to heat and cool and power our buildings. So that means it's the fossil fuels that are used to generate the electricity that we plug into in every plug in every wall in every building. And it also means the fossil fuels we use to keep our interiors comfortable in our boilers and to heat our hot water in our hot water systems as well. So we have a very dense, complicated, and aging building stock, as everyone is keenly aware. We have some of the most talented building professionals in the entire world here in New York City. But it is just sort of squarely true that when New York City takes action on climate change, it means grappling with the reality of our building stock, figuring out how to reduce emissions from existing buildings and shift towards a world where the new buildings that we build are highly efficient and very light on the climate, which means overwhelmingly use electricity and having that electricity come from clean and renewable sources of energy. So some recent accomplishments that I would describe as administration accomplishments, a lot of the work that has been done in the offices that became the Office of Climate and Sustainability. We helped to develop and pass what's known as the Climate Mobilization Act. So I'm sure most people are familiar with this. It was the centerpiece was Local Law 97, but it was really a package of bills designed to reduce emissions associated with buildings in the 5 boroughs. Included the first carbon targets for New York City buildings designed to spur investments in retrofits and a shift to clean energy and energy efficiency. But then it also included some laws designed to spur the development of green roofs and solar roofs and building energy grades and the authorization of clean property assessed clean energy financing. So a new financing tool to help finance a lot of this work that gets done. So just this year, we launched a program called the NYC Accelerator Program. And this is really designed to provide free assistance to anybody who is looking to meet the requirements of Local Law 97, to help building owners come into compliance, to decarbonize their buildings, improve energy efficiency. Connected to that and sort of complementing that work, we launched the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Finance Program. So this is a new financing tool that lenders are going to be able to provide. And with the key feature is that it's paid back on your property tax bill. So it's a program that was launched in close coordination with the city's Department of Finance, and it means that building owners will be able to, ideally enjoy lower interest rates and really have a loan that runs with the building and can be paid off based on the energy savings that come from the types of clean energy and energy efficiency investments that building owners are able to make. So all of these things combined mean a clear law that is designed to set the targets and goals for buildings in New York City, what we all need to do in order to dramatically reduce our contributions to climate change, and then these really comprehensive support programs to help people understand what their obligations are, help folks get the work done, and help finance the changes that we're going to need to see. This is a great example of the place where, we are really optimistic to see a huge amount of both innovation and job creation. So every time a building invests in a retrofit, that's a huge number of construction jobs, and folks are able to deliver that work and also think with the building owner about how to do it in a thoughtful and cost-effective way. That's a huge number of jobs for the professionals that are here today and across the whole building industry. And it means that as the time goes on, the techniques that are developed in buildings across the 5 boroughs can be applied to other buildings in our city, but really that in the decades ahead, as this work is needing to happen in cities all across the country, all across the world, we really hope to see New York City become a beacon and an industry leader in making these types of dramatic changes to existing buildings, and really leading the way in a way that I think New York is used to. But we'd like to see that feeling continue in the building retrofit world. So what are we thinking about for 2021 and the balance of the year? So, one of my top priorities is to make sure that people feel like they understand what's required of them under Local Law 97, and that they have every tool available to help move forward. So, I'm keenly aware that Local Law 97 creates a lot of challenges. It's designed to be challenging because the challenges we face are real and quite difficult. But it's designed to be flexible, meaning there's no one-size-fits-all approach to buildings and how an individual building can reduce its contributions to climate change. But we want to make sure that people have the incentive, the financing that they need, and that they're connected with all the technical assistance they need to help come into compliance with that law. The next thing, and I referenced this when I talked about the International Energy Administration's pathways, is we really want to lay the foundation for further building decarbonization and new highly efficient all-electric buildings. I think we see a future where, and we see the industry shifting this way, that in both communities across the country and across the world are embracing a future where new buildings rely far less heavily on fossil fuels, particularly for heat and hot water. And the mayor has said he's interested in setting a date certain. The date he said was 2030, after which all new buildings in the city of New York would be reliant on electricity rather than fossil fuels, particularly for their sort of core building system needs. That's something we know the council is interested in, and the broader environmentalist community is interested in. But it's also something that all the way up to the UN and President Biden, there's pretty broad consensus from every level of government that the future of our buildings is electric and powered by clean and renewable sources of electricity. And we really want New York City and the building industry here to be leading the way on that. Another thing we're going to be talking a little bit more later in the year is expanding the carbon challenge. We've seen a lot of really incredible folks leading the way on reducing their contributions to climate change, and we want to continue celebrating great work and share the lessons and continue to move the goal, meaning celebrate even deeper and even further and even more exciting emission reductions, and celebrate the successes when folks are really going above and beyond to lay the foundation for fighting climate change. We have a couple of legislative priorities, one of which is this electric buildings piece, but wanted to at least mention a couple of other things we're going to be discussing with the council and working with all of you on. One is we really want to increase access to electric vehicle chargers in parking lots. There was a 2013 law that set some baseline rules for what it means to make sure that the parking spaces in the city of New York are ready for an all-electric vehicle future. We think that's worth updating and making sure that when new parking spots are built across the 5 boroughs, they're ready to have a charger. And we think it makes sense to start requiring that a certain number of chargers be put into place. As well as shifting the existing parking spots to accept chargers and be ready. This is obviously a little bit of a chicken and egg dynamic where we see a future where electric vehicles are coming, and we want the charging infrastructure to be ready when that shift happens. I think every indication from the federal government and from all the auto industry is this is the future of vehicles, and we want to be ready with our built environment. We are also really excited about the possibilities of geothermal systems. I know there are a lot of private systems that are being developed as folks think about ways to reduce their emissions under local law 97. We think it makes sense to give New York City the authority to build district systems that multiple building owners could connect into to replace their heat and hot water and their temperature controls. And we're going to be working with the council to authorize us to be able to provide that type of service. I spoke a little bit about the future of buildings and the all electric buildings. That's something we want to continue working with all of you on. Hear your thoughts, think about how we can accelerate that shift in a thoughtful way. But we think it makes sense to set a date, all of us all together, when fossil fuels will not be used for those primary building systems. In that vein, we think it makes sense to accelerate the phase out of some of the dirtiest fuels that are currently being used in the city, particularly fuel oil number 4. And we're interested in codifying the mayor's commitment to all electric school buses by 2035. We didn't talk a ton about a lot of the work that we've been doing on the fleet and electric vehicle side, but that's a major part of our work. We think a lot about street transformation. We think a lot about electrifying our vehicle fleet. And that's something we're hoping to work with the council on to move forward. With that, I guess I would just reiterate that we really can't do this alone, and really looking forward to working with all of you and everyone on this Zoom to share your expertise and your leadership to help drive this shift in the industry, this shift in the city, and to really help inform our office and the whole city as we move ahead on these big ambitious goals. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions and really looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Thank you, Ben, for that presentation. I will now kick off Q&A. Reminder, if you want to ask Ben a question, use the raise your hand feature and I'll call on you by name. Otherwise, please keep yourself on mute. So yeah, I'll kick things off with one question before we get into member questions. Ben, you obviously touched upon LL97 and compliance with that's going to be a big issue for the industry. So can you talk a little bit more about how we as a city, state, and the building industry set ourselves up better for success in complying with the mandates? What has to happen tomorrow, the near future, for more clean energy to be produced and transmitted to the city? And then what should buildings be doing in order to prepare to avoid fines and be in compliance?
Sure. Yeah. So that's I'll take each of those pieces in turn. So, I think the first thing is that my real message is that the city is here to help, right? I think we don't see the targets and the goals of local law 97 as a penalty, meaning the targets are designed to organize us, to organize our actions. So we have a target that each building owner is thoughtfully managing towards. We launched the New York City Accelerator Program and the CPACE program precisely to help building owners think through what they can do to sort of do their share to reduce emissions associated with their buildings and the economic activity that takes place in their structure. And we really want to be partners in that work and thoughtfully move forward. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, Michael, a major part of that is making sure that the emissions associated with electricity usage are as clean and renewable and low carbon as possible. And that means that both the city and the state and the federal government really all need to be working arm in arm to bring a lot more high quality, zero emission, clean and renewable sources of electricity onto the grid in New York State. So one thing I'd say is that we've been working very closely with NYSERDA on their Tier 4 process, which is what they're describing their process for identifying high quality projects that would bring zero emission electricity and connect it directly into New York City. So investments in new transmission and new generation. We're really enthusiastic about that. about that process. And earlier this year, the mayor signed a commitment letter saying that when that electricity starts flowing, the New York City government wants to be a customer for that electricity, so we can help spur the development of clean and renewable electricity sources that are directly connected to the 5 boroughs. That's designed not just to reduce emissions associated with New York City government operations, but also to clean the grid generally. So every building owner that uses electricity in New York City can benefit from those new clean and renewable sources of electricity. There's a similar dynamic with offshore wind that we're really enthusiastic about the state investing in and moving forward. And I think with both the infrastructure bill and the potential reconciliation package moving in DC, the stars are sort of aligning for a huge amount of new federal resources to come to support the development of new high quality, clean and renewable electricity sources that we'd want to see, all across the state connected into the 5 boroughs, on rooftops in the 5 boroughs in the form of solar, in the form of battery storage. But all of this runs through electrifying a lot of uses that are currently fossil fuel uses and bringing a huge amount of brand new clean and renewable electricity onto the grid. So that's something that every level of government should be working arm in arm on. And I know that folks on this call and I've been thinking really deeply about this and bringing building owners together to identify ways to be purchasing electricity or spurring the development of new renewable electricity is something we're really interested in working, and anyone who's working with anyone on to make that a reality.
Great, thank you. So in terms of member questions, we have William up first.
Thanks so much, Ben, for joining us this afternoon. And you touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how the office might go about working to ensure the reliability of local networks as power shifts to renewables. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm really interested in is what resources might be made available to maintain utility networks when intermittent resources like wind or solar aren't available. As you know, the resources would have to be quickly dispatched. And so right now, natural gas fills that bill, but there is a thinking that, a mix of renewable natural gas, green hydrogen, and long-term storage have to be a part of the mix in terms of development. So I'm just wondering if you might have any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we strongly agree with these notions, right? I mean, our office is we have an Office of Energy Policy here, and we do a lot of the filings on behalf of the city before the Public Service Commission, and we're always seeking to balance these really aggressive decarbonization goals with reliability goals, with affordability goals. And I think you're exactly right, William, that a huge part of this is making sure that we have the complementary resources to make sure that as we're bringing on, wind and solar, we also have storage, we also have other types of large scale baseload dispatchable power that can serve to complement that electricity that had, it is historically part of an appeal of hydropower resources that might exist elsewhere in the state or north of the border. And I think, as we navigate forward, it's going to be hugely important for us to be decarbonizing, but of course, maintaining reliability as we go. And, I think there's a combination of dispatching or deploying currently existing technologies, but also I think it's fair to say there's going to be a huge amount of research and development and technological innovation in the next couple of decades on this front, from long-term storage to different types of replacements for fuels or other types of you mentioned hydrogen as an example of a place. There's obviously some level of controversy and skepticism about some of these technologies, but in general, my sense is if it genuinely is reducing emissions, if it's genuinely improving reliability, we can't afford to take anything off the table.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. Next up, we have Richard.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Ben, could you speak to the basis for some of the timeframes that were presented in the plan? For example, the school bus timeframe for 2035 or some of the others, and how the office develop some of those, as they seem to be in some cases pretty far out.
Yeah, no, I think thanks for the question. I think we always set timelines from one of two directions, right? We can sort of say where we are and look forward and say what are we able to accomplish in the first year and the next year, and sort of extrapolate forward, or we work backwards from the imperative, right? So to the extent that there are goals that are set because we feel like in order to avoid the worst consequences of climate change, we need to be pushing ourselves to be moving as quickly as we can. I think school buses by way of example, is a combination of those two things. We know we need to move as expeditiously as we can to electrify every internal combustion engine that we have. To be honest with you, I think school buses is a pretty nascent industry, and it's genuinely something where we wanted to make sure that we had a date certain to push the industry, to make them clear that we're interested in doing this. But I think, I was around in 2015 when we set a bunch of goals around our light duty city vehicle fleet, and much to our joy, the industry has changed really substantially, such that we're now able to meet a lot of our purchasing goals for light duty electric vehicles much sooner than we anticipated, because the industry is changing so fast. I would love that to be the reality on the school bus front. I think if I had to guess, I would guess that we could potentially achieve that goal even sooner than we set, but it's a pretty nascent industry. There aren't that many companies that are making electric school buses right now. We wanted to make sure we were sending a signal, but also that we were being a little bit realistic, since it might be a little bit slow going in the first couple of years as the industry matures. So there's a similar dynamic going on in a lot of the goals we set.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rich. Kevin.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Kevin Reed. I'm actually at Stony Brook University, but I'm here as a partner of CASER today. Thanks for letting us join along. You were talking a little bit, Ben, about kind of technological advances, and I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to how you think it can be best for some of the large, public research universities in the region to help serve as that connector to kind of breakthrough research, workforce development, and maybe, our wide spectrum of reach into communities on the front line, as a way in which we can help the city as well as the state kind of reach and achieve its stated climate change goals.
Thanks so much for that question, Kevin. I would love to partner and discuss on all of those things, right? I think there are a lot of really knotty, both technical questions associated with deep decarbonization, and as both building owners in the private sector and the public sector approach the hardest questions, there's a huge amount of research that would be helpful to sharpen and further and deepen some of the hardest questions. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think the building Congress is keenly aware that the amount of work that will be needed is going to require a huge amount of new types of work that's done, new types of jobs, new training and upskilling that's required. And I think the network of universities in New York State and New York City is a great place for us to be partnering to think through. I think ideally the demand for these services exists such that when we're training folks up, there's immediately a job or an obvious place for folks to go. I think moving the industry and moving the workforce is something that really is best when it goes hand in hand, and the workforce needs are informed not just by us in government sort of extrapolating outward, but from the private sector saying, here are the things that we really need done, here are the folks that the skills that we're really needing to hire up. So that way we can focus our workforce development efforts on places where when someone has those skills, there's a job that they can connect to soon and right away. And it's fulfilling a real need that the private sector has identified.
Awesome, thank you.
Ben, we wanted to ask a question related to, you mentioned that the mayor has this executive order for mandating, sort of banning fossil fuel hookups, which would go in effect in 2030. And the council is looking at a bill, or at least introduced a bill that would speed that timeline up by, significantly, depending who you ask. So I'm curious, like, what's your position or the administration's position on that bill? And assuming that timeline is accelerated, like, what other things need to happen on a parallel track to get us all to that target deadline?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So that is precisely the piece of legislation that I was sort of indicating towards when I described accelerating all electric buildings. So one way of talking about this is a gas hookup ban, but the way I really like to think about it is accelerating the development of brand new high efficiency all electric structures that are really the buildings of the future. So, it is true. Well, the way it would be structured is after a certain date, we wouldn't be relying on fossil fuels. So we wouldn't need a sort of conventional gas hookup connected to a boiler in a basement, but instead we'd be doing a high efficiency heat pumps for heating or hot water and using electricity for our core building systems. I think interestingly, the IEA set as a date 2025 for all buildings to all new buildings to not use fossil fuels for their heat and hot water. I think that is sort of the global charge of that's the direction. The mayor set a goal of 2030 when it seemed a little bit harrowing, but I think the realities of climate change are such that we're really looking to develop in the 5 boroughs expertise and an industry that will shift as a matter of course, that when a new building gets built, it's built far less reliant on fossil fuels for its core building systems, and instead is embracing sort of electric alternatives. I think that there's genuinely a combination of technology and workforce that would be needed to really allow this to shift. Though I would say that I think there's already been some pretty high profile, impressive examples of all electric buildings going up across the 5 boroughs. And I think the workforce, as it shifts, it goes back to the point I was making a little bit before, but as the demand emerges, I think, the trade unions and folks who think a lot about making sure that the construction skills exist out there, I think we're fairly well situated to be able to shift and pivot, though I think that's exactly the type of thing that I'd love to hear more from this group and others about how the city can be as supportive as possible about shifting to this, it's really a new model for construction, but I think it's one that the roadmap is fairly clear, and there's some really exciting early examples of how this can be a sort of cost competitive alternative even right now, let alone once we've had a few years to work out problems, develop best practices and sort of spread it throughout the industry. But that's precisely the type of thing that I would love to hear from this group on and hear more about the way to do that, and in not just a way that complies with our goals, but also can make New York City a leader in what I think is the building typologies of the future all around the world.
Thank you.
Vince? Vince?
Yes, Ben, my name is Vince Cushing. I'm with Q Coefficient. We have an ongoing study. A demonstration was supposed to happen this summer in New York, but COVID set us back. So it's now aimed for next summer. It's a demonstration funded by the Solar Energy Technology Office at the U.S. Department of Energy. Its focuses on large commercial buildings in Manhattan. 2 questions for you. We're not really sure what's the best forum for us to be sharing our results with, our plans, our demonstration, our building operations. We're not sure exactly where to share that in New York City. The second question, and this has been plaguing us now for 2 years, Solar Energy Technology Office giving us a number of leads, different institutions. We're having trouble finding a photovoltaic vendor that is interested in and focused on the Manhattan market specifically.
That's very interesting, Vince. I mean, if you want to follow up with folks from our office, I think we are both in the business of identifying best practices and sharing good news or interesting lessons learned of particular strategies that people have taken to try to reduce emissions in their buildings. And then also, obviously, if there's a particular challenge in the solar market, there's folks in our office who think a lot about ways to accelerate and make solar easier than ever to install in the 5 boroughs. So happy to follow up on that.
Ben, I had a question, and again, if folks want to ask a question or provide comments, feel free to raise your hand. I think following up on something William asked about the the need for storage of electricity or other sources, sort of while the sun's not out and the wind's not blowing. In thinking about either real estate space for the storage of these electric batteries, or even safety, as as folks think about massive amount of wattage being stored in a particular place, like, are there things that we should be thinking about, both in terms of how this affects the real estate market and safety for communities that may not want to be next to a very huge 4-story battery?
Yeah, and our office works very closely with FDNY and DOB on making sure that anything that gets installed in the 5 boroughs is safe and done thoughtfully. If anything, I think we really both need to be working with industry and folks who are interested in installing battery storage in the 5 boroughs to figure out ways for them to establish the safety of battery storage, but also help us get comfortable with the level of safety, so we can be installing it safely in as many places as we can, right? I think we really face this twin imperative of, we recognize that battery storage is going to be a huge part of the decarbonization puzzle, and while of course we want to make sure that it's done in a safe and thoughtful way, so folks can feel confident, as confident as they are in existing buildings, that the energy systems that exist are not a danger to them. So that's something that the city government as a whole takes really seriously.
All right, any other questions? We have a little time left. Jeff.
Hey everyone, Jeff Lee from Carp Strategies. Ben, thanks for the great presentation and great questions. I'm just curious, Local Law 97 is something where the quote unquote teeth are still a few years out. Every day we look to I think it's 2024 as the day when, the real sort of penalties kick in. Just curious if, Ben, if your team has seen any interesting recent precedents of commercial property owners that have taken proactive measures to upgrade and to potentially serve as a model for what the commercial real estate folks can look to for ways to plan, ways to think, and ways to implement the changes that need to be made to come into Local Law 97 compliance.
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. Thanks for the question. I think we've seen this in a lot of places in a pretty heartening way. I think there are examples from both the carbon challenge folks who've been proactive, not just since the passage of Local Law 97, but really, for many years now in reducing emissions associated with building operations. A lot of the targets that were set in Local Law 97 were precisely because the team had seen people able to take these types of actions and reduce substantially their energy usage in their buildings. And a lot of the targets were set, building type by building type, not to push people entirely beyond the pale of possibility, but to bring folks to a level where it was sort of the best practices for operations and efficiency upgrades in a particular class of buildings. I think we're also seeing a lot of new construction happening that is far more energy efficient with an eye towards Local Law 97 compliance, along with just complying with the ever-tightening energy codes, mostly because I think it makes a ton of sense. Why on earth would you build a brand new building just to have to retrofit it in the next 4 or 5 years? And we've seen a lot of really interesting and thoughtful designs and buildings go up that not just come into compliance, but sort of tout their extent to which they're able to exceed compliance. I think both from the retrofit accelerator is really designed to be spreading those best practices and connecting building owners with, there's an entire professional community that's sort of building up around helping building owners think through what they could do to both come into compliance with Local Law 97, but really almost more importantly, there's all sorts of great reasons why someone would want to improve the energy efficiency of their buildings, from tenant comfort and indoor air quality and operational savings on the sort of utility bill side. So I think for all of those reasons, there's lots of resources that we're happy to share with anybody. And I think as As the year goes on, we want to, we're planning lots of ways to get the word out even more, so people can really feel like, they have a real partner in coming into compliance, and can really start to spread best practices and support building owners as they come into compliance.
All right, thanks, Jeffrey. Any other final questions? Okay, well, I guess that's it. Ben, thank you again for your time today. Thanks to all our members for joining, and we will, as mentioned, be circulating a copy of this recording and Ben's presentation to all of you. If you have any additional questions for Ben or his team, or generally for the Building Congress, feel free to reach out to Charlie or me, and we'll assist in any way we can. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thanks. Really nice to speak with everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.